thank you all for tuning in. So this is my friend Max, and we have spent a bunch of time, the two of us, just like talking about the world and how we can make it better. And he has a really interesting perspective because of his background, which is obviously very different to mine. And when I did my last WTF video on the Constitution, he reached out to me and he was like, I'd love to talk about the Constitution's connection to biology. And I was like, what? I mean, that seemed really crazy even for you, but I was intrigued, of course. And I really want to use this space to share all different kinds of knowledge with you guys. So the opportunity for us to learn about something outside of the usual topics that I talk about was really exciting for me. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll try to explain the relationship of biology to the Constitution as best as I can.
I'm sure you're going to do a great job because you always explain everything to me in such simple, clear, easy to understand ways. So I know that our audience will grasp as well, and I think they're going to love it. So I guess we should first start by introducing you. So this is Max, everyone, as you know, but what's his deal? So Max studies the neuroscience of feeling, which basically means the study of the nervous system, right? And its connection to feeling and emotion, right? Did I get that?
Yeah.
At USC's Brain and Creativity Institute under Dr. Antonio DiMaggio, who is one of the most recognized voices in this field in the world. He's a remarkable man who I've also had the pleasure of meeting. Is super interesting. And so Max is in very good company. And Max believes that the neuroscience of feeling can help us to believe in ourselves and in each other and re-inspire the seriously epic idea of democracy. Sounds really cool. And you also founded USC's first student-run think tank. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing this. And also thank you all for tuning in and thinking about this stuff. There's so many things out there that are competing for your attention. And I really value finding spaces where we can give each other and ourselves permission to think about and care about bigger picture stuff that affects all of us. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really inspired by all of you guys that are tuning in and your engagement, and it's just been really remarkable. So I guess we should get right into it. Walk us through some of these ideas from the beginning.
So the basic reason that I reached out to you was, we take the Constitution for granted, and we take for granted that it's such an important thing. And it is a really important thing. It's important that we know about it. But for me, at least, I didn't really ever feel it like in my body, why it was so important until I started thinking about what kind of vision for humanity the founders must have had. And I just want to share a little bit about that reasoning process because I found it really inspiring and super empowering for our generation to reconnect with that idea, especially now. And just the basics is that in order for freedom and self-governance to even be a good idea, like why would you want people to have freedom and self-governance? You need to really believe that at their core, people are good, they want to cooperate, we're all part of something in this together. And each of us is inherently valuable for this collective effort to build a society that's thriving. And in that way, the Constitution was sort of a gamble, a big, bold bet on humans. It believed, it's the idea that we can believe in ourselves and each other. And I think that sometimes gets lost because in large part, the Constitution was written, a long time ago, and it was based on philosophers that are even older. Like John Locke, who I only found out about recently by watching YouTube videos that my friend sent me. And I think Nathalia will post links to some of those later in case you're interested.
Yeah.
Full permission to not be interested.
Well, just so you guys know, I'm actually going to be posting kind of the summary of our conversation, and as well as links to any of the things that Max is discussing or recommending. So you guys will have all of it there, so you don't have to worry about like going back or trying to find it. So don't worry, I got you.
Awesome. And yeah, so basically the Constitution, the idea for why the Constitution and democracy was a good idea, that was all based on these old philosophers who just aren't that relatable anymore. And I think it can be really useful to find a new way of reconnecting with the ideas that inspired it in the first place. So that's the basic idea.
I got that. So what's the connection to neuroscience then? Because I'm with you,
well,
but
sure. So basically, neuroscience is getting really exciting right now because we're learning some things about human feeling and human behavior that allow us to make a new case for why, people are good, why we're, cooperative creatures, and why we can believe in ourselves and our efforts to create a better society together. And we don't need to rely on these ancient philosophers anymore to justify it. We can actually understand this in terms of science, which is really, really exciting, sort of profoundly exciting. It gets me up out of bed every day.
And that's the goal, right? In life, do something
right.
that gets you excited.
It's getting harder, but
Yeah.
So Nathalia mentioned that I work with Dr. Antonio DiMaggio at USC's Brain and Creativity Institute, and I study feeling, human feeling, where they come from, and what's going on in our bodies while we experience them. And it's worth giving a little bit of background about Dr. DiMaggio's work just to sort of set the frame. And the first thing I want to mention is that it's a really big deal in history that we're even able to study feeling at all, because for a long time it was thought that it was totally impossible to study feeling. It's a subjective experience, and the idea that the only thing that we can know to be true are like physical, objective, chemical structures of the external world. That idea can be traced all the way back to ancient Greece, when people were trying to figure out, what elements of my experience are true and I can trust them and I can base my actions on them, and what things that I experience are not true and I should, keep my distance from them and not base my behaviors on them at all. And the outcome of this debate was that, the physical material qualities of the external world were considered to be true, and internal experience like emotion and feeling and all of these sort of private experiences that we all have were considered, too variable to be trusted, and basically we were taught to avoid them at all costs. And this only changed very recently, actually, in the last 20 years or so. So basically within all of, I know, within our lifetime, this is finally changing, because the invention of brain imaging devices lets us look inside the brain of an alive and conscious person and see what's happening when people are having certain experiences. And that's a really big deal, because suddenly, private mental experience isn't this black box that only exists subjectively. Right. And in my own mind, I can see correlates, biological processes happening in somebody else that accompany whatever they're experiencing. And I can start to understand the background for it because of that. It's a huge deal.
Yeah. Wow.
And super, super exciting. So basically the background for Dr. DiMaggio's work is that he totally rewrote the way that we understand feeling to be put together and where it comes from. We used to think that feelings were put together in the most recently evolved, highest parts of our brain, and that we should suppress them if we can, because they lead us to irrational behaviors. And Dr. DiMaggio was a neurologist at first, and so he got patients that had damage to different parts of the brain, and the damage in those parts of the brain corresponded to differences in their behavior. And so he had a really interesting way of starting to study this. And his work has basically just turned our understanding of feeling on its head. Now we know that feelings are not put together in the most recently evolved, highest parts of the brain. They're actually constructed in our brainstem, which is the very base of the brain, and it's the part of the brain that we share with, almost all animals that have brains at all. The brainstem does something really interesting in regulating our life, which gives us some clues about feeling. And what the brainstem does is it integrates signals from throughout our body. So your brain is connected to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord has these tendrils that go all the way, to your fingers and your toes and all into your torso. And in the brainstem, all of these signals get collected and mapped. And so if you were to look at that part of your spinal cord and where it meets the brain, you would basically see a representation of the state of your body at that moment.
Wow.
And super cool. So feelings, the basis for feeling is that process. And if you have damage to the regions that are stitching together these maps, you don't have any experience of feeling at all. And the other thing that's really wild is reason is actually disrupted as well. So uh, it's been thought for a really long time that in order to make rational decisions, we had to distance ourselves from feeling and emotion. And he actually had some really well-known patients who had damage to emotion processing brain regions, and they can't make rational decisions effectively. They get stuck on, what food to eat for lunch or what shoe to put on first, and just loop in that state. And there are a bunch of tasks where you can study this, and they have a really hard time making decisions that are beneficial for them. So it totally turns on its head the idea that what we've known about feeling and emotion, and how it relates to reason. And a better way of thinking about it really is that feeling and emotion guides us in a certain direction that's beneficial for life, and reason helps us to narrow down our decisions so that we pick something that's ideal from within that direction. So that's sort of the basics.
And the relationship between like emotions and feeling and reason. I can't help but think of, the classic arguments that are made that, women can't be leaders or women shouldn't be in power because they're too emotional. This kind of turns all of that onto its head.
Yeah, I mean, it has some really profound implications, and we're seeing it also in other topics now too. Like, there's this whole movement around, people rethinking the idea that men have to be cold and super, strong and masculine. It's like, turns out that might have actually been a real problem.
Oh, yeah. And then that's for another episode.
Sure.
But yeah, it's interesting because I feel like we've all been kind of brought up, and you've shown that this is not just our generation, but like historically, that we've all been brought up on this idea that in order to make rational decisions, we need to remove ourselves from our feelings. And so I find this very interesting. It's something that everyone can kind of relate to in a way. But
it's a lot to cover in a few minutes, but
it is like, we're not going to come out of here with PhDs, so don't worry. But I find that fascinating, and I'm with you so far, but I still kind of want to understand what this all has to do with democracy and governance.
Right. So that's where it's super interesting, because the way that we've understood the construction of the institutions of society for a really long time has been that they've been created by reason, right? So the idea since the Enlightenment, which, hundreds of years ago, the idea that that reason is the thing that has allowed us to build these social institutions and structures. And it's not that that's wrong. It's not that it's wrong that reason has been the thing that we've used to build these structures, but it's also true at the same time that reason is inseparable from emotion and feeling, and that emotion and feeling are inseparable from biological processes occurring within our body that are changing the state of our organs and everything within us in order to meet the needs of any situation. So the implication is that while reason has been a key part of the construction of societal institutions, at the same time as that's true, the whole process has been guided by and underpinned by biology since the very beginning. So it's like, we saw the very tip of the iceberg. We understand that reason is super important, but below the surface, there's this huge richness of other stuff going on that we have had no idea about. And I think that's where we can start to get some really interesting insights into sort of why we have the structures we have and how we can make them better.
Yeah, so just because we didn't think of it that way, or we didn't know that it was there, it doesn't mean that it wasn't there all along. So we've been kind of guided by these natural forces, so to say, without even being aware that that's what's guiding us.
And one implication is that, we've done pretty well. Objectively speaking, society has gotten better on a lot of key metrics, but it's also not up for debate that we've made a ton of mistakes. And it's possible that a big part of the reason why we've made so many mistakes is that we just haven't understood the underlying context for, why we've been doing it at all.
And maybe we can now start, with the help of your research and other things similar, we can start to reimagine a different kind of future and not make the same mistakes. Very optimistically.
We'll see about that. Stay tuned.
So I wanted you to kind of guide us through how biology and like these biological processes have guided the creation of democracy.
Okay, so Let's see. I think there's actually one thing that I wanted to zero in on earlier. You mentioned that
Yeah.
the neuroscience of feeling involves the nervous system, and it's true that
Did I
it's
say something wrong?
neuroscience. No. Well, it's a really interesting thing that actually not many people know, and actually I didn't even learn in school. I learned it after I graduated, which is that the nervous system is first of all super recently evolved, and it's not separable from the non-neural parts of the body. So there are places in the nervous system, in the brain, where chemical signals from the endocrine system, the immune system, and other physiological systems can get direct access to the brain. And these, the endocrine system and the immune system are much older in evolution than nervous systems. And so anything that the brain does, the nervous system didn't change how life runs. It didn't change the basics of how life goes. So when we say that, we built society because our biology has guided us, it's true, but it's also not just human biology that's guided us. We are taking cues from all of life, stretching back to the earliest, most simple organisms on the planet. And that's where it gets like, it's sort of mind-bogglingly profound if you really sit with that and think about it. That all of our mental experiences they're not created by the brain, they're enabled by the brain, but they're based in these super ancient processes that have enabled bacteria to survive and evolve into humans and elephants and whales. I mean, it's totally bonkers.
Yeah, that is a kind of crazy thing to try to wrap my head around. And the fact that you kind of sit with this stuff all day, every day, and like research it also kind of blows my mind.
It's a dream. I mean, I have to pinch myself.
That's amazing.
So you asked, I want to get back to your question. You asked, what does this have to do with building democracy?
That we're like bacteria,
Right. Well, I mean, there's plenty of like really fun facts here. Like there's like more bacterial cells in your body than human cells. Like not many people know that. It's pretty wild.
Wow.
There's a whole theory about human behavior that actually we're just like moving around and operating in the interest of the bacteria. The bacteria are like pulling the strings, and we are just like really advanced bacteria houses. That's
that
a pretty
that
intense one.
Sounds like Elon Musk's simulation theory. So this is like a biology version of that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. It's a nice thing to think about, but I don't know about it.
So I guess but back to democracy. Which is always that's always where I go, where my brain goes, but
totally fine. So basically, the really obvious tie-in is that the things of like wanting to be free from the King of England, not wanting to be a subject, not wanting to have to pay a bunch of taxes to a king when you don't have representation, all of these things that are sort of fundamental to American identity. And basically just the idea that I want to be free. I want to be able to live my life on my own terms. And I also think other people should want to be free. Those are feelings. It feels terrible when somebody else is like requiring you to do something. So the motive for creating, a free society was a affective or feeling motive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one tie-in. And the other thing is, I mentioned earlier that a lot of the ideals of democracy, like the idea that people are cooperative and that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and that there's value to each individual, those values we're now finding you can start to make a case for them in terms of these underlying biological processes. And that's really exciting because I think it offers an opportunity to sort of refresh democracy, from the bottom up, instead of having to have a violent revolution and start over.
Yeah, so it's like a foundation of what we all have in common, and something that everyone can relate to. And
right.
And
so,
also, I see Betsy Ramos just asked a really interesting question about how, if you can tell us how people can get involved and like advocate for democracy. And so Max is going to give us some really great tips at the end. And so like to like practical uses of this information as well.
Sure. So the three things that I kind of want to focus on about these values that I think actually you can make a case for in biological terms are really this idea that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and that we belong to it. And that's sort of offered just by the fact that, we all have a private mental experience that is only ours. But at the same time as we have this private mental experience that is only ours, our feeling is based in the structures of our body. And so while we may feel different things at different moments, my anger probably feels like your anger. My fear feels like your fear. And so at the base of our private mental lives, there is this common ground that runs so much deeper than any, cultural, generational, geographical differences. So at a biological level and with an understanding of feeling, there is something that binds us all together. There is something larger that we do belong to. So that one value is solid.
And is this oversimplifying it? If I were to say, like, describe what you just explained, like we all know the feeling of hunger, like when your stomach is rumbling and like that pain, or when you're excited and you get like those like that feeling. I mean, as an actress, we're trained to like connect with those like physical reactions that we have and like exploit them in a way. So I'm very familiar with like the feelings of feeling, for lack of a better word. And so I've never thought of it like from a science or a biology perspective. But would that be like a fair,
totally
way to think about what you're saying?
For sure. I mean, so there's actually, I'll just point to a study that came out a few years ago where they surveyed a bunch of people and they asked them to, describe what happens in your body and what sensations happen in your body and where when you have different feelings. And the result of this huge survey was that, feelings like anger, almost everybody experiences heat in their hands. Feelings like gratitude and love, almost everybody experiences heat in their chest. And those are just two examples, but things like anger, there's a tightness and it's not just visceral feelings, it's also changes in how your mind works. So there's like a laser focus when you're really angry. When you're sort of feeling playful, your focus widens, you notice more things. And then the main things that change among different feelings are like the tightness and relaxation of your blood vessels, your airways, the rate at which you breathe and at which your heart beats, the tension of your muscles that keep you upright or, relaxed. These are all the variables, and they change depending on the state of your body and what your body needs in order to meet whatever the situation is that you're in right now. So this is like the basis for all of your experiences at any time. The feeling part of any experience is going to be based on the state of your body. And that's the same for everybody.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, it's the same for everybody. Exactly. It is.
So then the next thing is so the idea, basically, in order for democracy to be a good idea, again, you need to believe that people are good and that they are well-intentioned and they want to support, each other and work together. And here too, you can have an explanation in biological terms, which is that, we know that we are all oriented towards positive feeling. We all live our life in a way where we want to feel good more than feel bad. And this doesn't mean, just hedonic pleasure. It also just means feeling fulfilled, connected to other people, etc. Totally. So like more wholesome stuff, and the thing is, we often we know that states of life that are better for us in terms of biology are the states of life that feel good. So like after eating a meal, after winning a competition, like whatever, we feel a lot better. But what we don't often realize is that the state of our life, if we want to max out our bar of well-being, it's limited by the well-being of organisms that we depend on. And we depend on other humans, of course, but we also depend on plants and animals for food and air, right? So we can't, our well-being status bar, for lack of a better term, can't be totally full until the plants and animals, the other organisms, the people that are around us, until all of their life conditions is maxed out, then our life condition can be maxed out. So you can make a compelling case that our personal orientation towards positive feeling is simultaneously an orientation towards improving the conditions of life for other people, other organisms that we depend on. And that's the basis of making the case that people are oriented towards a common good. And that's a profound thing to just say in like a few seconds, but You know, we can talk about this for hours and hours.
And we do.
We do.
But that's something that is something. I mean, you're going through your 3 points now, and I'm going to summarize them on my website, like I said, for everyone. But something just for people to like sit and think about that for a while. That your own personal well-being, happiness, health, all of the things that you wish for yourself and for your loved ones is dependent on the well-being of any living thing, creature, person around you. That's crazy.
And
like that's deep.
And it is, like, seriously. And I would also even take it another step and just say that if you want to feel better, you know, in your own life, if you're struggling, or if you want to live a life that's fulfilled, a really compelling way of doing that is living a life of service and living a life where you are working to improve the conditions of the broader living system that we all depend on. That is probably going to be the most fulfilling thing you could do, because that is going to increase your well-being status bar better than anything else. So I think that that's a really, really useful sort of actionable thing.
And I think it's something that people don't often, not to interrupt, but like something that kind of just thought of that people don't often realize is that I think that this has such, just thinking in these terms will have such a profound impact on the way that we live our daily lives, and will really improve them, because so often I think we've been told or convinced, or we believe that buying this, you know, this like outfit or this thing or like doing this or whatever is going to make us happy. And we know time and time again that we get the package in the mail, we open it, we're excited for 2 seconds, and then like we're over it, we move on, and it hasn't really changed our life, and it hasn't made it, we're still left with like that emptiness of something that was lacking when we first reached for that in the first place. And so if we kind of change our perspective and look at what really, from a biological level, but then also a social level and just in our daily lives, like what is actually going to improve our well-being, that can really have an impact on the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's super cool.
Totally. And so the last sort of value that I think was at the core of you know, the idea that democracy is a good idea in the first place is that, you know, there's value for each individual in this common effort, and that's sort of really important. This struck me a lot when I was an undergraduate, and I was trying to figure out sort of what is my role, like how do I understand my role relative to other people, and I started thinking about it and what, you know, so basically, if we are already oriented toward the common good, basically oriented toward improving the condition of life for organisms that we depend on for our survival, we've already set that. Then each of our perspectives is fundamentally limited. That's just true. I know it sucks to be reminded of that, but it's true.
Right.
I only see out of my eyes. You know, I can see lots of stuff, but I only see out of my eyes and not out of yours, for instance. And so that's true. So our perspective is limited. We only see a sliver of the world. But the flip side of that is that we actually see individually, personally, I actually see more about the world in my own context than anybody than you do, for instance. And you see more about the world in your context than I do,
right?
Because we project onto every situation things that we've learned in the past, impressions and such. So while it's true that, and it's frustrating that our perspective is limited inherently, it's also true that there is fundamentally something that we see about the world, that each of us sees about the world, above and beyond what anybody else can possibly see, simply because it comes from our past experiences. So that's really, that combination is really valuable, because, you know, our species, as any species, has to, in order to survive, it has to adapt to changing environmental conditions. And our environmental conditions are changing faster than, you know, they've ever changed before. Right. And we have to adapt faster than we've ever had to adapt before. And, you know, if I only see a certain sliver of reality, then I'm only going to see certain problems, certain possibilities for solutions. But the ones that I do see, I'm likely to see them more clearly than other people. And so if you zoom out, and this is a tough like thing to explain via Instagram Live, but if you zoom out in your mind and like think about all people going about their life, identifying problems, thinking of solutions, all of them are responsive to specific ones and not to other ones. So something that might really rile me up, you know, environmental degradation, for instance, may not be an issue to you or to some other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. It doesn't have to be an issue to everybody. As long as it's an issue to somebody and we integrate everybody's perspective, then all together we end up with this like remarkably multi-dimensional view of both the problems we're facing, the possible solutions to them. And so I think that you can find a place and a value for every single individual in this common effort to build a better society and a better future, simply because we all see things that other people don't, and because nobody can see the whole picture with all its complexity just inherently. So those are three, the idea that we belong to something bigger than ourselves, we're all oriented toward a common good, and there's value for the individual, and we should allow the individual to be free in, honoring their motive to improve the condition of life. Those are three like really important pillars that sort of support the idea that democracy is a good idea, and why it is that the Constitution was something that we needed and we should have, and we should, you mentioned in your last video, and I love this sentence, that your focus on the one of the lines of the preamble about the effort to create a more perfect union.
Yeah.
I mean, in order for that to even be something that we can take seriously, we have to believe already these three pillars. And if we can start to believe them again, then there's a chance that we could actually be more effective over time in that tall order.
This is just such an uplifting and inspiring conversation for right now, I think, and especially when people are locked up and feeling lonely or isolated or helpless, and there's so many things going on. So first, thank you for this. I really appreciate this worldview, and I think it is remarkably powerful. And I also find it really relevant because right now the coronavirus has made it so clear like how interconnected we all are, and how everything that we do affects the other. I don't think there's ever been a moment in our lifetimes where that has been like it's always been the case, but I don't think it's ever been like presented to us in this way. Like, this is what we've been telling.
It was going to be like an alien invasion or this.
That's what I always said. I'm really into sci-fi, and I was always like, well, the only thing that's going to bring humanity together is an alien invasion. And in a way, a virus is kind of that, in a sense. And so now we're all in it together. Everything, it doesn't matter what I do in my personal home, or what my state does, or what my country does, because if I just go out, or if I get off, or whatever it is that we do, like, all of those things don't matter anymore. If someone comes in, like, we're all in it together. And so I really think that for all of us here, and the fact that people are joining and then they're going to watch this after, says a lot about people's, how all of you guys are like so interested and really want to make a difference and learn and improve yourselves. And I think that by starting to incorporate some of these principles and ideas of both our common humanity and then like the biological inclination towards diversity, as a way of navigating, the complexities of this crazy world, I really think that these are really powerful tools that can better equip us to finding solutions at every level, whether it's at home with our family or like as we move up the ranks. And so that's really exciting to me. Really cool.
That's awesome. So one thing I do want to mention is that, part of being young is like really great for a lot of reasons, but it's also really frustrating for a lot of reasons because, we can look at the world and we can want to make change, and there are things that we can do. But if you're being serious, a lot of stuff is going to be really difficult. Like, it's going to be really difficult for us to rework, the structures and the values at the core of the societal institutions we have, simply because we're super young. And so I think that there's an interesting way of thinking about this that's actually really empowering, which is that, it's true that our generation right now doesn't have a whole lot of clout. We don't have a whole lot of power, and it's really easy to look at the world and sort of sit back and feel defeated and be like, well, it's just this way. It's going to always be this way. We really can't do anything about it. And one thing that's really helped me in thinking about, thinking through the same process is realizing that if we do nothing else over the course of the next 30 years or so, but gradually move up the professional ladder along with everyone else and just manage to not lose our values and the sense that we're in this together, and the sense that there are these pillars that we can believe in the idea of freedom and democracy for everybody. By the time we're in our mid 50s and early 60s, we will, simply by virtue of us being older, we will be the leaders of governments, of businesses, of schools, of organizations, of you name it. And if we have maintained a relationship to our own values and a connection to other people that inspire us and that hold us accountable to those values, then at that time, by default, those values will be the leading values, once again, of the institutions of society. It will just happen through time. I think I don't often think about 30 years into the future, but I think it's really important because it means something for what we do day to day now and how we plan our life, because we have this huge luxury of having, time. We can build things, we can plan, we can meet people, we can slowly, learn. And at some point we will be able to, define the future of where our civilization goes.
We will. And I really hope that all of you heard that and took that to heart. I think that is perhaps one of the most, I don't want to say the most important, because everything you said was really important, but something that's really, I want you all to sit with and to connect with, because I get so many questions from you guys on how can I make a difference? What can I do today? People are frustrated and we feel totally out of control. And we also feel like, what's the point? Sometimes we can't really make a difference. And I think that what you just said is in a way the easiest thing that we can do, and it's just be a good person and know that by doing what you feel is the right thing, being a good person, being kind to your neighbors, living a life of service or of value and of meaning, and finding what it is that you're passionate about, and really just this, like, moving forward with that, that's enough, guys. Like, that's enough. And I think that you should sit with that, and I hope that it makes you feel a little less powerless and a little more optimistic, and that you don't ever sway from those things. Don't ever feel discouraged, because you are, just by being the best you that you can be, you're already doing a lot.
Totally. I mean, this is, you mentioned the organization that I founded at USC, Novus Think Tank, and it was basically around the same idea, just giving students, undergraduate students, permission to think about the world, to articulate their values, to find a community that they can, feel that they belong and that they have value within. And, they think about their different committees, and they tackle like sustainability, and they tackle homelessness, and they tackle mental health. Awesome. And these, political polarization, these huge issues. It's not so that the undergrads themselves will solve them. It's so that they get practice and comfort, thinking about these things, giving themselves permission to really dig into research and thinking and problem solving with each other, with the idea that in time, as they ascend the professional ladder, they will have the opportunity to build on those skills. And it's been amazing, because the students, you wouldn't expect college students to want to think about serious things. Like the stereotype is that they just want to party and they just don't care about anything. Yeah. And I've actually found it to be the opposite. If you really give them permission to care, and you show them that they can be valuable and their experience is valuable, and there is value in the diversity of experience, they light up. I mean, it's like they have a whole new lease on life, and the community that comes from that is super, super profoundly, like, re-inspiring.
That's something that I hope all of you will think about and take to heart. And I want to see, I already feel it in this little online virtual community that we've all been building. And it's really, I mean, I agree. I don't feel, I feel like all of you guys that are tuning in are care deeply and are so passionate, and I want you guys to feel empowered and inspired. And so This conversation was so useful. It's a direction that I never would have seen it taking. You know, I never would have thought that biology and neuroscience and science in general could ever relate to the work that I do in politics. And I've learned that at its core, it's a part of every single thing that we do. And so I want to thank you for coming on and for being so eloquent and explaining these things in such a clear way. I really hope that you guys, took these lessons to heart and have some ideas. I hope it inspired you. It gave you a little spark in these.
I hope it
these
wasn't
next few
boring.
weeks. Yeah, and I want to go through some questions here quickly just to see if anyone asked anything that we hadn't really covered yet. There's one question that was asked of you a few times that was how, and it's something that I would love for you to clarify, because a few people have been asking, how do we remove emotions in order to make rational decisions? And I think that's the exact opposite of what you've been trying to say. So let's.
So on the one hand, yes, but it's really interesting. It's really interesting that is such an ingrained idea that we sort of take for granted, that in order to make rational decisions, we have to remove emotion. And yeah, as I said in the beginning, and I think you're going to save the video of this, and so people can watch the beginning if they just tuned in afterwards.
Yeah.
Basically, what we were learning is that, so if you have, there are parts of your brain that support the construction of emotion, and if you have damage to those parts of your brain, then you can't make rational decisions. There are people who are neurology patients, that are in studies, and you're able to like assess people's decision-making ability. And when folks have damage to emotion processing brain regions, the ability to make decisions that are better for their life it's totally destroyed. So it's a complete misunderstanding that that emotions prevent us from making rational decisions. A better way of thinking about it that actually comes from somebody else at the BCI, Mary Helen Imordino Yang, who's she's a developmental neuroscientist and she specializes in education. She calls emotions the rudder, like, of the boat. So you have a boat and there's a rudder, and the rudder is what steers the boat. And so emotions are, if they are based in the state of your body, it orients you in a certain direction. And within that direction, there's a ton of, so like, okay, here's an example. You're hungry, right? You're hungry. You're oriented in the direction of, I need to eat something. But within that, there's like infinite different things you can eat. You can eat like, something that's not edible. You can eat something that's really tasty, but is going to give you a stomach ache later.
For 3 hours.
Or you can, eat something that is good for you or whatever. And so you use reason to filter from these options. I probably shouldn't eat the carpet, right? I probably shouldn't eat the, the printer paper. Like the cookies are a good option. It's really enticing, but like, let's be serious. Like, I ate them for the last meal, so maybe this time I should eat, something else. And so that's the rational process, selecting from within this direction of, I need something to fuel my body. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about emotion and feeling and their relationship to reason. Full stop. I could keep rambling, but that's fine.
Well, you are the best teacher. Thank you so much, Max. Guys, I'm gonna work on this doc with all the information that we covered and some links. And so thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for your questions, and thank you, Max, for your time, because this was seriously.
Thank you for doing this, and thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. We'll speak soon. Have a great day. See you guys. Thanks for joining.
Take care.